There is a state in this country where a one-bedroom apartment in the city costs more per month than most people earn in a quarter, where the word affordable has been used so many times without meaning anything that it has essentially retired from the language. That state is California. And yet right now, today, there are ranches in California selling for $8,000, $10,000, sometimes less. Ghost towns where the land stretches farther than you can see and the price tag looks like someone dropped a digit. So subscribe and let's figure out why nobody is buying. Number 10, Bodie, Mono County. If you have ever seen a photograph of a perfectly preserved ghost town, the kind where the curtains are still hanging in the windows and the bottles are still sitting on the bar and everything looks like the people just stepped out for a moment and never came back, there is a good chance you were looking at Bodie. The town was founded in 1859 after a man named William Bodie, spelled differently because someone at the county recorder's office apparently had their own opinions about orthography, discovered gold in the eastern Sierra Nevada. By 1880, Bodie had a population of somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 people. It had 65 saloons. 65, that is one saloon for every 150 people, which tells you everything you need to know about how the residents of Bodie organized their priorities. It also had a red light district, a Chinatown, a daily newspaper, and a reputation for violence so well established that when a little girl learned her family was moving there, she reportedly wrote in her diary, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." Whether that is entirely true is debated by historians. It has survived 140 years because it feels true, and in California, that is basically the same thing. The gold gave out. A fire in 1932 destroyed much of what remained. By 1942, the post office closed. The state acquired Bodie in 1962 and turned it into a state historic park, which means you cannot buy the town itself. But the surrounding land in Mono County, the sage flats and volcanic ridges stretching in every direction, is among the cheapest real estate in the state. 20-acre parcels list for $12,000 to $25,000. Some go lower. The reason is what Mono County actually is. It is cold in a way that is not pleasantly rustic, but genuinely savage. Bodie holds the California record for lowest recorded temperature, -54 degrees Fahrenheit, in 1937. The growing season is 6 weeks. The nearest hospital is an hour south. And the Long Valley caldera, a supervolcano sitting just south of the county line, is described by the United States Geological Survey using the word unrest. Unrest. That is the geological equivalent of your doctor saying the test results are interesting. You can buy land here for less than a used pickup truck. Just know exactly what you are buying. Number 9, Calico, San Bernardino County. Calico was born in 1881 when silver was discovered in the Calico Mountains, about 10 miles northeast of Barstow. At its peak, the town had over 1,200 people and produced $86 million worth of silver over its productive life, which sounds impressive until you realize the silver market collapsed in 1896 when the United States moved off the silver standard and Calico went from boom town to bust town in the time it takes most people to refinance a mortgage. Walter Knott, the same man who built Knott's Berry Farm, purchased Calico in 1951, restored it as a tourist attraction, and donated it to San Bernardino County in 1966. Today, Calico is essentially a theme park version of itself, which is either charming or deeply strange depending on your relationship with authenticity. Outside the tourist zone, the surrounding Mojave Desert land is extraordinarily cheap. 5-acre parcels near Yermo list for $5,000 to $12,000. 20-acre tracts go for $15,000 to $25,000. The per-acre price in the most remote sections drops to $200 or $300, which is less than a parking spot costs in downtown Los Angeles per month. The reason is the Mojave Desert itself. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees, not for a day or two. For weeks, there is no municipal water near the cheap parcels. Drilling a well runs $20,000 to $40,000 with no guarantee of hitting anything drinkable. Carl says he always wanted to live in the desert. I told Carl that wanting to live in the desert and actually living in the desert are separated by approximately 115-degree afternoon with a broken swamp cooler and no shade. Carl nodded. Carl kept looking at listings. Number 8, Drawbridge, Santa Clara County. Drawbridge is the only ghost town in California you cannot drive to. There is no road, there is no path, there is no bridge. which given the name feels like a particular kind of irony. The only way to reach what remains is to walk 2 miles along an abandoned railroad track, and once you get there, you are not allowed inside the structures because they are sinking and the state of California would prefer you not sink with them. Drawbridge was established in 1876 as a hunting and fishing community on a small island in the southern end of San Francisco Bay. At its peak in the 1920s, it had around 90 structures and roughly 100 year-round residents working the salt marshes and fishing the bay. There were no cars because there were no roads. People arrived by train and left by train, and in between they lived a life genuinely isolated in a way that is hard to imagine when you consider that San Jose is visible on a clear day from the island. The bay began reclaiming Drawbridge in the 1930s. Salt water rotted the foundations. The railroad stopped running passengers. By the 1960s, the last residents had left and what remained began its slow collapse into the bay mud. The surrounding wetland parcels in southern Santa Clara County occasionally appear on tax rolls at prices that seem impossible for a county bordering Silicon Valley. Some have sold for $10,000 to $25,000 because they sit in flood zones with zero development potential and a legal framework involving the Bay Conservation and Development Commission that makes buying property feel like earning a law degree in real time. You cannot build on most of it. You cannot drain it. You cannot alter it. What you can do is technically own San Francisco Bay shoreline for less than a kitchen renovation and spend the rest of your life explaining your decisions to people who will never fully understand them. Number 7, Cerro Gordo, Inyo County. The name means fat hill in Spanish, which is either poetic or blunt depending on your mood. The town that grew on that fat hill in the Inyo Mountains became one of the most productive silver and lead mines in California history. Between 1866 and 1878, Cerro Gordo produced silver bullion that literally funded the early growth of Los Angeles. Mule teams carried it down to the valley floor, and from there it went south and built a city that now has 4 million people and no memory whatsoever of the mining camp that paid for it. In 2018, a young man named Brent Underwood purchased Cerro Gordo for $1.4 million and documented his restoration on social media. The story went viral. Then the American Hotel burned down while he was living there alone during the pandemic, and his account of standing outside at 3 a.m, watching a 150-year-old building turn to ash while completely isolated above Death Valley, is the kind of story that quietly dismantles every romantic notion you have ever had about ghost town living. Cerro Gordo itself is privately held and not for sale. The point is Inyo County, which surrounds it, second largest county in California by land area, population of approximately 18,000 people across 10,000 square miles, less than 2 people per square mile. Desert parcels near Lone Pine list for $8,000 to $20,000. More remote tracts go lower. The short version of why is that Los Angeles stole all the water 100 years ago and the valley never recovered. The nearest trauma center is 3 to 4 hours away in either Reno or Los Angeles. The altitude runs between 4,000 and 8,000 feet, which affects everything from how fast you get winded to how long it takes to boil pasta. Small daily reminders that you are a very long way from anywhere that has heard of you. Number 6, Mentryville, Los Angeles County. This one surprises people, and it should, because Mentryville is technically in Los Angeles County, which is a sentence that should not logically precede a discussion of dirt cheap land. But the Santa Susana Mountains in the northwestern corner of the county are not Bel Air. They are steep, fire-scarred, chaparral-covered hills that the oil industry chewed up and spit out over 60 years and then largely forgot about. Mentryville was established in 1875 when Charles Alexander Mentry drilled California's first commercially successful oil well, a well called Pico No. 4, which produced continuously for 114 years, longer than any other oil well in the world at the time of its closure. The town housed workers and families of the California Star Oil Company and later Standard Oil. It had a schoolhouse, company houses, a cookhouse, and the kind of self-contained functionality that oil companies built when they needed their workforce on site because the alternative was horses, and nobody wanted horses. The oil played out. Mentryville is now part of Pico Canyon Park, so the town itself is not for sale. But surrounding canyon land in the Santa Susana corridor has sold for $15,000 to $35,000. which seems impossible for a county where the median home price is north of $800,000. The catch is fire. The Santa Susana Mountains sit in one of the highest fire risk zones in California, which, in a state that has essentially reclassified fire as a weather pattern, is saying something genuinely serious. After the Woolsey fire in 2018 burned nearly 100,000 acres through this corridor, multiple insurance companies pulled out of the California wildfire market entirely. The California Fair Plan, the state's insurer of last resort, has seen its policy count triple as private insurers have exited. You can buy land here. What you may not be able to do is insure anything you build on it, which is the kind of detail that transforms a bargain into an education. Number 5, Randsburg, Kern County. Randsburg is not quite dead. I want to be precise about that. With a population somewhere between 50 and 100 people, depending on the time of year and who is counting, Randsburg occupies that peculiar category of towns that have refused to finish dying, like a campfire that keeps producing one small flame no matter how many times you think it has gone out. The town was founded in 1895 when gold was discovered in the Mojave Desert near the junction of what are now Highways 395 and 178. At its peak around 1900, Randsburg had a population of over 3,500 people and a red light district, a fact that local historical materials mention with the particular energy of people who find it charming in retrospect. The Rand mining district produced gold, silver, and tungsten over several decades, and the town hung on longer than most because the ore body kept producing in modest quantities even as the big operations wound down. Today, Randsburg has a general store that doubles as a soda fountain, a few antique shops that open on weekends when the mood strikes, a tiny white church, and streets that are mostly quiet in a way that feels less like peace and more like the town holding its breath. Land in and around Randsburg is extraordinarily cheap even by Mojave Desert standards. 5-acre parcels can be found for $5,000 to $9,000. 20-acre tracts list for $12,000 to $18,000. Some go lower. The per-acre price drops toward $300 in the most remote sections, which puts it in the same price category as a decent pair of boots. The problem is everything that the price reflects. The Mojave Desert here receives less than 5 inches of rainfall per year. Summer temperatures exceed 110 degrees with routine indifference. There is no municipal water system. The nearest hospital is in Ridgecrest, about 25 miles west, which has a population of around 28,000 and the medical infrastructure of a mid-sized California city, meaning better than nothing and worse than what most people are used to. The old mine workings in the Rand mining district have left behind contaminated soil and water in some areas, the precise location and extent of which requires professional testing to determine. Buying land near an old mine without testing the soil and water is not boldness, it is not frugality, it is a decision you will spend several years explaining to a doctor. Gladys, my neighbor, looked at Randsburg listings online and said the general store looked cute. I told her cute closes at 4 on Sundays and there is nothing else for 30 miles in any direction. She closed the laptop, that was that. Number 4, Manzanar. Inyo County. Manzanar is not a ghost town in the traditional sense. No gold brought people here, no silver, no railroad. What brought people to this flat, windswept section of Owens Valley in 1942 was the United States government, which forcibly relocated 10,146 Japanese Americans here after the attack on Pearl Harbor under Executive Order 9066, signed by President Franklin Roosevelt. The name Manzanar means apple orchard in Spanish, a reference to the orchards planted by early settlers in the Owens Valley before Los Angeles acquired the water rights and the agricultural economy collapsed. The irony of imprisoning people in a place named for the fertile life that was itself destroyed by institutional decisions is the kind of thing that requires a moment to sit with. At its peak, Manzanar had 504 buildings arranged in 36 blocks. It had schools, a hospital, churches, a newspaper, baseball diamonds, and a population that was imprisoned there not because they had done anything wrong, but because of who they were and what they looked like. The last prisoners left in November of 1945. The structures were demolished or sold off. The site was largely abandoned, used briefly as an airport, and then simply left to the desert. Manzanar is now a National Historic Site operated by the National Park Service. You cannot buy it. But the surrounding Owens Valley, as I mentioned when we talked about Cerro Gordo, is some of the cheapest land in California. The reason the Owens Valley is cheap requires understanding what Los Angeles did to it. In the early 1900s, William Mulholland and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power orchestrated one of the most audacious water grabs in American history, purchasing land and water rights throughout the valley under the pretense of small farm buyers and then diverting the Owens River 230 miles south through the Los Angeles Aqueduct, which opened in 1913. The Owens Lake, which had been a significant body of water for thousands of years, dried up completely by 1926. What remained was a dry, alkaline lake bed that became and remains one of the largest sources of dust pollution in the United States. The dust contains arsenic, cadmium, nickel, and other heavy metals from the exposed lakebed sediments. Los Angeles has spent over $2 billion on dust mitigation at Owens Lake since being ordered to do so by air quality regulators. $2 billion to partially address the consequences of draining a lake to water lawns 400 miles away. Land in the Owens Valley near Manzanar, near the dry lake bed in areas where the history is visible in every direction, sells for $6,000 to $15,000 per acre in some parcels and considerably less in others. It is some of the cheapest land in the state. The cheapness is not an accident. It is an accounting of what was done here and what remains. Number 3, Swansea, Inyo County. Swansea sits on the western shore of what was once Owens Lake, which means it now sits on the western edge of a dry, toxic alkaline flat that stretches for miles in every direction and produces dust storms that register on air quality monitors as far away as Las Vegas on bad days. The town was established in 1869 as a lead smelting operation serving the mines of Cerro Gordo. Ore came down from the Inyo Mountains on a tramway, was processed at the Swansea smelter, and the resulting lead and silver bullion was transported north. At its peak, Swansea had several hundred residents, smelting furnaces that burned 24 hours a day, and the particular quality of life you would expect in a company town built around processing toxic heavy metals in a desert basin with no ventilation other than what the wind provided. The wind, it turns out, is still providing. Swansea today is a scatter of adobe ruins and foundation remnants on the lakebed edge. There are no residents, there are no services, there are no utilities. There is a historical marker, and there is the dust, which is not a metaphor. The Owens Lake dust is a genuine environmental crisis, designated as a serious non-attainment zone under the Federal Clean Air Act, meaning the air quality here violates federal health standards on a regular basis during high wind events. Land parcels in the immediate Swansea area occasionally appear in tax records and occasionally change hands at prices that range from nearly free to a few $1,000s. The reason they are nearly free is that you cannot develop them in any meaningful sense. The environmental liability attached to property adjacent to a designated toxic dust zone is substantial. The water table is contaminated in many areas from both the lakebed sediments and the legacy of over a century of industrial activity, and the nearest anything is Lone Pine, about 15 miles north, which has a population of around 2,000 and the charm of a small eastern Sierra town and absolutely nothing resembling a full-service medical facility. People occasionally ask if you could buy land near Swansea and build an off-grid homestead. You could technically, in the same way that you could technically swim across San Francisco Bay. The question is not whether it is possible. The question is whether the consequences of attempting it are something you have fully thought through. Number 2, Saltdale, Kern County. Saltdale sits on the edge of Cone Dry Lake in the Fremont Valley, which is a name that combines 3 of the most important words in California's catalog of abandoned places: dry, valley, formerly something. The community was established in the early 20th century around borax and salt extraction operations on the lake bed. Cone Lake, during the wet years, would fill with enough water to make the extraction viable. During the dry years, which are most of the years, it was a flat white expanse of mineral deposits baking under a sky so blue and so indifferent, it almost feels hostile. The operations came and went. The workers came and went. The town that supported them shrank from a small, functioning community to a scatter of remaining structures occupied by a handful of people who have decided that this particular corner of the Kern County desert is where they are going to make their stand. The current population of Saltdale is somewhere between 20 and 50 people, and that number fluctuates enough that the Census Bureau seems to approach it with the philosophical flexibility it reserves for places that are not entirely sure whether they qualify as places. Land in and around Saltdale can be found for prices that require reading twice. 5-acre parcels near the dry lake bed list for $3,000 to $7,000. Some go lower if the seller is motivated, and out here, motivated is a word that covers a lot of ground. The Mojave Desert heat in this part of Kern County reaches 115 degrees in summer and does so without the romantic quality that word sometimes implies. It is just hot. Continuously, comprehensively, unromantically hot. The dry lake bed creates its own complications. Cone Lake, like every other dry lake in the California desert, fills periodically during heavy rain events. When it fills fast, and the flat terrain means the water has nowhere to go except into whatever structures have been built too close to the edge. Several properties in the Saltdale area carry flood zone designations that make conventional financing unavailable, insurance expensive, and the basic question of where the water goes during a wet year, something you absolutely need to answer before signing anything. The soil in former mining and extraction areas around the lake has not been comprehensively tested in many sections. What has been tested suggests the presence of minerals and compounds at concentrations that warrant attention. Attention is a polite word. Get the soil tested, get the water tested, get everything tested, then read the results carefully before deciding that 8,000 acres of dry California lake bed is the investment opportunity you have been waiting for. Number 1, Lanfair Valley, San Bernardino County. We end not with a single ghost town, but with something larger. Lanfair Valley sits in the eastern Mojave Desert in the far northeastern corner of San Bernardino County, inside and around what is now the Mojave National Preserve. High desert grassland at roughly 3,500 feet elevation, ringed by volcanic cinder cones, Joshua tree forests, and the particular quality of silence that most Americans will never experience because they have never been far enough from a road to hear it. People tried to settle Lanfair Valley. They genuinely tried. In the early 1900s, homesteaders arrived under the Small Tract Act and the Desert Land Act and other pieces of congressional legislation written by people who had either never seen the Mojave Desert or had seen it once, very briefly, in April when it looks like the most beautiful place on earth. They built ranches. They sank wells. The Lanfair Post Office opened in 1915. There was a school. There were enough families scattered across the valley to constitute something that resembled a community if you were willing to drive 4 miles between neighbors. By the 1950s, most of them had left. The ranches were abandoned. The well casings were left sticking out of the desert floor like the last evidence of an argument that the desert won decisively and without particular effort. Outside the preserve boundary, land is still available, and the prices look like typos. 20-acre ranches in the Lanfair corridor list for $8,000 to $20,000. Some of the more remote tracts trade hands for less than $500 per acre in tax sales. San Bernardino County is the largest county in the continental United States by land area, covering 20,000 square miles, and there are sections where the county cannot confirm with confidence when the roads were last graded. No grid power, no municipal water, no sewer, no cell service. The nearest hospital is in Needles, 60 miles east, where summer temperatures reach 120 degrees, which means 60 miles in any direction is not necessarily an improvement. Drilling a reliable well here costs $30,000 to $50,000. Solar power runs another $15,000 to $25,000. Septic another $8,000 to $15,000. By the time Lanfair is habitable by any reasonable definition of that word, you have spent more than the purchase price several times over. Carl emailed me about a listing out there, 20 acres, a collapsed fence line, and a view of the Paiute Mountains that honestly does look spectacular in the photograph. $11,000. Carl said it seemed like you could not go wrong. I told Carl that everyone who ever came to Lanfair Valley said exactly that. The desert has been listening to that sentence since 1915, and it has never once changed its answer. I told Carl that the history of California's empty places is essentially a long list of people who thought the same thing. The gold miners who built Bodie and then left when the gold ran out, the silver miners who built Cerro Gordo and stripped the mountain and moved on. The homesteaders who plowed the Lanfair Valley and discovered that the desert had been a desert for a very long time before they arrived and intended to remain one regardless of their intentions. The families imprisoned at Manzanar in a valley that Los Angeles had already drained dry. The borax workers in Saltdale waiting for the lake to fill. All of them came with a reason. All of them left. What remains is the land, and the land in California's ghost towns and forgotten valleys is real. And it is cheap, and it is beautiful, in the specific way that only places which have outlasted every human ambition directed at them can be beautiful. A beauty that does not need you, does not notice you, and will still be there long after whatever you build has returned to the dust. The price is not a scam. The price is information. It is the market's way of telling you exactly what it costs to want something this much in a place this far from everything else. Bring cash, bring water. Bring a contractor who has actually worked in the desert before and not one who saw the listing on Zillow last week and thought it seemed like an adventure. And for the love of everything, test the water before you drink it. I am getting old, and old people worry. Take care of yourselves out there. And Carl, stop sending me listings. Gladys already said no. And Gladys is, as always, correct.